Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Podcast. Today is Friday, January 3rd, 2020, my first podcast of the new year and the new decade. I know it's been a while since I've done a podcast, but I'm back, and we're going to be better than ever. And today we're going to discuss all the bowl games, go over some scores, and then I'll do my picks for the weekend's couple bowl games. College basketball, look back on last night's scores, look ahead to today and the weekend. Same for the NBA and the NHL. Then we will discuss some firings in college football and in the NFL. And then I want to do a nice fun little segment called What We Know about the NFL playoff teams and the questions I have for each NFL playoff teams. Then we'll pick the NFL wildcard round games. We'll do my sports predictions for 2020. And I'll have my best bet of the day. All right. Now we'll do some college football bowl results and look ahead a little bit to the weekend's bowl games. In terms of the national title game, I'll pick that game on the night of the title game, which would be Monday, January 13th. So that's that for you. So the first day of bowl season was Friday, December 20th. Buffalo defeated Charlotte 31-9. Closes out a good year for Buffalo as they finished their 8-5, Charlotte 7-6. Kent State over Utah State 51-41 in the Frisco Bowl. There was speculation about whether quarterback Jordan Love was going to play for Utah State, and he did, but didn't matter. Kent State won outright. They finished the year at 7-6. Good season for them. Utah State 7-6. On Saturday, December 21st, the New Mexico Bowl. San Diego State over Central Michigan 48-11. That was a blowout. San Diego State 10-3. Central Michigan 8-6. Liberty over Georgia Southern 23-16. I was wrong about that game. I thought Georgia Southern was going to win. Liberty 8-5. Georgia Southern 7-6. Then in terms of the other bowl games I went over, I was correct on all of those. FAU over SMU 52-28. To me, the most surprising result of the bowl season thus far. FAU 11-3. They close out a good season. Obviously, their coach, Lane Kiffin, leaving to go to Ole Miss. SMU closes the year 10-3. Arkansas State over Florida International 34-26. Arkansas State 8-5. FIU 6-7. Washington over 19. Boise State 38-7. I was wrong about this game. I thought that Boise was going to show up, but they didn't. It was one of the more bizarre no-shows. But give Washington credit. It was the final game for Chris Peterson as the coach of Washington. They finished the year 8-5. Boise finishes at 12-2. Number 20, Appalachian State over UAB 31-17. This was no surprise. App State was probably one of the locks of the bowl season in terms of a straight-up pick. App State 13-1. UAB 9-5. Monday, December 23rd, UCF over Marshall 48-25. This was another big lock in my mind in terms of a straight-up call. UCF 10-3. Marshall 8-5. Christmas Eve night, December 24th, Hawaii over BYU 38-34 in the Hawaii Bowl. Hawaii 10-5, BYU 7-6. December 26th, the Thursday, Louisiana Tech over Miami 14-0 in one of the uglier bowl games of the bowl season. Louisiana Tech finishes a good season at 10-3. Miami a disappointing 6-7. Pitt over Eastern Michigan 34-30 in what was a competitive quick lane bowl. Pitt 8-5, Eastern Michigan 6-7. Friday, December 27th, North Carolina over Temple 55-13. UNC 7-6, Temple 8-5. Michigan State over Wake Forest 27-21 in the Pinstripe Bowl. I was wrong about that one. I thought Wake would win. Michigan State 7-6, Wake 8-5. Texas A&M over number 25 Oklahoma State 24-21. Oklahoma State backdoored at the end in the Texas Bowl. A&M 8-5, Oklahoma State 8-5. The Holiday Bowl, number 16 Iowa over number 22 USA 49-24. Iowa 10-3, USC 8-5. Cheez-It Bowl, Air Force over Washington State, 31-21 in the Cheez-It Bowl. Air Force finishes a great season at 11-2. Washington State 6-7. All right, Saturday, December 28th. Cotton Bowl Classic, number 10 Penn State over number 17 Memphis, 53-39. Penn State 11-2. Memphis 12-2. The Camping World Bowl, number 15 Notre Dame over Iowa State, 33-9. Notre Dame 11-2. Iowa State disappointing 7-6. Semifinal of the college football playoff was the Peach Bowl, number 1 LSU over number 4 Oklahoma, 63-28. This was a blowout pretty much from the get-go, except at one point it was 7-7. LSU 14, Oklahoma finishes at 12-2. In the second college football playoff semifinal, it was the Fiesta Bowl, which was an all-time classic, number 3 Clemson over number 2 Ohio State, 29-23. This ranks among the better semifinal games we had. I know that Rose Bowl a few years ago with Oklahoma and Georgia was a good one, but this one was arguably better. It was more competitive, sort of, than that Rose Bowl, because that Rose Bowl, Georgia had to come from behind to win that game. That was a blowout early. This one probably should have been a blowout early, but Ohio State missed opportunities to put away Clemson, but Clemson prevails. They're 14-0. Ohio State closes at 13-1. Monday, December 30th, Western Kentucky over Western Michigan, 23-20 on a game-winning field goal by Corey Munson. Western Kentucky 9-4, Western Michigan 7-6. Louisville over Mississippi State, 38-28 in the Music City Bowl. Louisville 8-5, Mississippi State 6-7. Cal over Illinois, 35-20 in the Red Box Bowl. Cal 8-5, Illinois 6-7. Number 9, Florida over number 24, Virginia 36-28 in the Orange Bowl. Florida 11-2, Virginia 9-5. New Year's Eve, Tuesday, December 31st. Kentucky over Virginia Tech, 37-30 in the Belk Bowl. Kentucky 8-5, Virginia Tech 8-5. Sun Bowl, Arizona State over Florida State, 20-14. Arizona State 8-5, Florida State 6-7. Liberty Bowl, number 20 Navy over Kansas State, or I should say number 23 Navy, 20-17 on a field goal at the end by Bijan Nichols. Navy finishes a great season at 11-2. Kansas State 11-5. I'm sorry, 8-5. Wyoming over Georgia State 38-17 in the Arizona Bowl. Wyoming 8-5. Georgia State 7-6. Texas upsets number 11 Utah 38-10 in the Alamo Bowl. Texas 8-5. Utah 11-3. New Year's Day Outback Bowl. Number 18, Minnesota over number 12, Auburn, 31-24 in the Outback Bowl. Minnesota finishes a great season at 11-2, Auburn 9-4. Citrus Bowl, number 13, Alabama over Michigan, 35-16. Bama finishes a somewhat disappointing season at 11-2. Number 14, Michigan finishes their disappointing year at 9-4. I called the Citrus Bowl the battle of brand disappointments. But Bama kind of is an asterisk because of Tua, obviously, being injured. If Tua doesn't get hurt, I think they're in the playoff instead of Oklahoma. But that's another story for another day. Number 6, Oregon over number 8, Wisconsin 28-27 in the Rose Bowl. This was a good game. Oregon 12-2, Wisconsin 10-4. Sugar Bowl, number 5, Georgia over number 7, Baylor 26-14. Georgia 12-2, Baylor 11-3. Could be Matt Rule's final game at Baylor. And yesterday, January 2nd, number 21 Cincinnati over Boston College 38-6 in the Birmingham Bowl. Cincinnati 11-3, BC 6-7. The Gator Bowl, Tennessee over Indiana 23-22. Tennessee was down 13 with 5 minutes to go. They came from behind to win. They finish a wacky season at 8-5, and Indiana finishes a solid year for them at 8-5. All right, picks for the weekend really quick. No bowl games today. We have bowl games tomorrow. Oh, wait, we do have a bowl game today. That's my mistake. Ohio against Nevada. Ohio on the year, 6-6. Nevada, 7-5. Ohio is favored in the game by 10. The over-under is 61.5. For my first podcast pick of 2020, I'm going to take the Nevada Wolfpack, 2 words, getting 10. I think that Ohio is super overvalued here. And I mean super overvalued. And I'm going to take it a step further. My first big upset pick of 2020, I think Nevada's going to win this game outright. They're plus 285 on the money line. So give me Nevada plus 10. And I think they'll win the game outright, the plus 285 on the money line. Tomorrow at early afternoon, well, it's really 11:30 Eastern time, Southern Miss against Tulane. Southern Miss on the season, 7-5. Tulane on the season, 6-6. Tulane obviously collapsed at the end of the year, losing 5 of their final 6 games. They're given 7. The over-under is 57. I'm going to take Southern Miss getting the 7 here, but I do think Tulane will win the game, if that makes sense. So I see like a 38-34 type of ball game with Tulane coming out on top. So give me Southern Miss plus the 7. I just think that Tulane should be giving more than 5 in this spot. And then the Monday, January 6th, we'll pick that game on Monday's podcast between Louisiana, Lafayette, and Miami of Ohio. Now we'll talk some college basketball. We're going to go over the results from last night and look ahead to tonight's and the weekend's set of games. So without further ado, here we go. FIU over UTEP, 69-67, and I think that was their conference opener. FIU on the season now improves 10-4. UTEP 9-5. Stephen F. Austin over Southeast Louisiana 82-71. Stephen F. Austin 12-2. Louisiana 3-10. Bryant over San Francisco, Pennsylvania 67-63. Bryant 9-5. San Fran, Pennsylvania 7-5. Liberty over Florida Gulf Coast 59-46. Liberty was undefeated until very recently when they lost at LSU. They're 15-1 on the season, so Liberty's a team, obviously, that we have to keep an eye on in terms of a small school at-large team. And Florida Gulf Coast, a disappointing 3-13. Maine over Columbia, 75-72 in overtime. Maine 4-10, Columbia 4-11. James Madison over UNC Wilmington, 64-60. JMU 8-6, UNC Wilmington 5-11. Winthrop over Longwood, 91-67. Winthrop 7-7, Longwood 5-9. Northeastern over Alon, 77-68. Northeastern 9-6, Alon 4-11. Wagner over Mount St. Mary's, 66-47. Wagner 4-8. Mount St. Mary's 4-10. Lipscomb over Stetson, 66-63. Lipscomb 6-8. Stetson 6-10. FAU over UTSA, 79-64. FAU 9-5. UTSA 6-8. Old Dominion over Middle Tennessee, 70-60. Old Dominion 5-9. Middle Tennessee 4-10. Charlotte over UAB, 51-44. Charlotte 7-5. UAB 9-5. Georgia State over App State, 69-60. Georgia State 10-4. App State 8-6. Georgia Southern over Coastal Carolina, 70-67. Georgia Southern 9-5. Coastal 8-6. Vermont over Dartmouth, 77-68. Vermont 10-5. Dartmouth 7-8. Gardner Webb over Campbell, 67-65. Gardner Webb 5-8. Campbell 9-4. North Alabama over Jacksonville, 62-57. North Alabama 6-8. Jacksonville 7-9. North Florida over Kennesaw State, 76-57. North Florida 8-8. Kennesaw 1-13. Purdue over Minnesota, 83-78 in double overtime. Purdue 9-5. Minnesota 7-6. Duquesne over St. Louis, 73-59. Duquesne a surprising 11-2. St. Louis 11-3. Richmond over St. Joe's, 84-52. Richmond 11-3. St. Joe's 3-10. So the A-10 is shaping up to be a decent league this season. VCU over Fordham, 64-46. VCU 11-3. Fordham 6-7. Brown over Rhode Island, 85-75. Brown 6-6. Rhode Island 8-4. Presbyterian over UNC Asheville, 79-77. Presbyterian 4-10. UNC Asheville 6-6. Charleston over Towson, 81-69. Charleston 9-6. Towson 6-9. William & Mary over Hofstra, 88-61. William & Mary 10-5. Hofstra 11-5. Bucknell over Army, 67-65. Bucknell 5-9. Army 5-7. Boston University over Lafayette 73-72. BU 7-7. Lafayette 8-4. Navy over Lehigh 64-58. Navy 7-5. Lehigh 3-10. Loyola Maryland over Holy Cross 80-70. Loyola Maryland 9-5. Holy Cross 1-13. Marshall over Rice 89-69. Marshall 7-7. Rice 8-6. Western Kentucky over North Texas 93-84. Western Kentucky 8-5. North Texas 6-8. Colgate over American 65-51. Colgate 10-4. American 4-8. Merrimack over Sacred Heart 65-57. Merrimack 7-7. Sacred Heart 7-7. Sam Houston State over McNeese 94-75. Sam Houston 10-4. McNeese 5-8. Charleston Southern over South Carolina Upstate 89-75. Chasso 7-6. On Upstate 5-9. Little Rock over Texas State 72-68. Little Rock 9-5. Texas State 7-7. Robert Morris over Central Connecticut State 89-78. Robert Morris 5-9. And Central Con 1-13. St. Francis Brooklyn over Fairleigh Dickinson 79-63. St. Francis Brooklyn 7-6. Fairleigh Dickinson disappointing 2-10. Eastern Kentucky over Tennessee Tech 74-59. Eastern Kentucky 4-10. Tennessee Tech 3-11. Number 14 Michigan State over Illinois 76-56. Michigan State 11-3. Illinois 9-5. SIU Edwardsville over Belmont 79-69. SIU Edwardsville 4-10. Belmont 9-5. Yale Monroe over Troy 79-63. Yale Monroe 5-7. Troy 5-9. UMKC over Seattle 90-86 in triple overtime. UMKC 8-7. Seattle 7-9. Texas Arlington over Arkansas State 73-52. UT Arlington 5-9. Arkansas State 10-4. A&M Corpus Christi over Northwestern State 67-62. Corpus Christi 5-9. Northwestern State 4-8. South Alabama over Louisiana 60-57. South Alabama 8-6. And Lafayette 5-9. Murray State over Tennessee Martin 89-76. Murray 8-5. Tennessee Martin 4-8. Nichols over Incarnate Word 76-60. Nichols 8-6. Incarnate Word 3-10. Lamar over New Orleans 74-67. Lamar 8-6. New Orleans 4-9. Houston Baptist over Central Arkansas 111-107 in overtime. Houston Baptist gets its first win. They're 1-10. Central Arkansas 3-11. Utah Valley over Chicago State 94-73. Utah Valley 7-9. Chicago State 4-12. Number 20 Dayton over LaSalle 84-58. Dayton 12-2. LaSalle 9-4. Utah over Oregon State 81-69. Utah 10-3. Oregon State 10-3. Tennessee State over Eastern Illinois 84-79. Tennessee State 9-5. Eastern Illinois 7-6. Austin Peay over Southeast Missouri State 78-63. Austin Peay 7-7. And Southeast Missouri 4-10. Colorado over number 4 Oregon 74-65. This is not an upset because Colorado closes a 1-point favorite. Colorado 12-2. Oregon 11-3. Montana over Southern Utah 60-58. Montana 7-7. Southern Utah 8-5. Northern Colorado over Montana State 68-59. Northern Colorado 8-5. Montana State 8-6. North Dakota State over Western Illinois 94-74. North Dakota State 10-5. Western Illinois 4-8. Jacksonville State over Morehead State 76-72. Jacksonville State 6-8. Morehead State 6-8. North Dakota over Denver 82-71. North Dakota 7-8. Denver 4-12. South Dakota State over Oral Roberts 96-79. South Dakota State 10-7. Oral Roberts 7-7. Idaho over Portland State 72-61. Idaho 5-9. Portland State 7-8. Number 1 Gonzaga over Portland 85-72. Gonzaga 15-1. Portland 8-8. Santa Barbara over Westmont 87-66. Santa Barbara's 11-4. UCLA over Washington 66-64. That's a pretty big upset. UCLA 8-6. That's a good bounce back win for them. They had a really bad loss a few weeks ago against, I think it was UC Riverside, and Washington 10-4. Cal Baptist over Texas Rio Grande 76-67. Cal Baptist 10-4. Rio Grande 4-10. William Marymount over San Diego 64-58. Marymount 7-8. San Diego 7-9. Pacific over Pepperdine 59-56. Pacific 13-4. That's a decent team from the WCC. Pepperdine 7-8. USC over Washington State 65-56. USC 12-2. That's an NCAA tournament team in the Pac-12, and Washington State's 9-5. Stanford over Cal 68-52. Stanford 12-2. They might be a tournament team. Cal 6-8. St. Mary's over San Francisco 69-58. St. Mary's 14-2. San Francisco 11-5. All right, Fridays are normally not busy. There's a game on their way right now. It's Mid-Atlantic Christian at NCA&T. I think that was a 2 o'clock tip. 7 o'clock Fox Sports 1. Wisconsin at number 5 Ohio State. Ohio State is favored by 7 in this spot, and the over-under is 124. And in terms of 2020 podcasts, in terms of picks, I'm going to pick a couple games that I feel like that are worth picking. Obviously, major conference games like Big 10, Big 12, SEC, etc., Big East, ACC, and a couple big like mid-major kind of games, or big games involving Gonzaga and teams like that, or San Diego State, teams that are ranked as well. So, in this spot, I think it's a good bounce back spot for the Buckeyes, who are coming off a loss against West Virginia from Sunday. So give me the Buckeyes minus the 7. And I apologize for my voice, guys. Dealing with a little cold. We have Wright State and Oakland on ESPNU. Wright State is giving 3.5 on the road. Oakland is a traditionally good team in the Horizon, but Wright State is very good this year. I think Wright State's going to get it done and cover the 3.5. And the other rule for this is that I'm picking games that are going to be seen on television as well, like this Wright State-Oakland game on ESPNU. Fairfield, Niagara, Monmouth, Siena, Toledo, Ball State on CBS Sports Network. Ball State is giving 1.5 at home. I'm going to take the Rockets here, getting the 1.5. I think they win the game outright. Both these teams are pretty solid in the MAC this year. Might give me Toledo. ESPNU at 7 o'clock, or I'm sorry, ESPN2. UCF at Houston. Houston's giving a whopping 10. I think that number is way too big. I think people are overreacting because Houston won the Hawaii Challenge at Christmas over Washington. I'm not convinced that Houston should be favored by double digits at home against a solid UCF team. I think this line should be closer to what the Ohio State Wisconsin line should be. So give me UCF plus the points. I do think Houston will win the game, but I just think that UCF will cover the point spread. Delaware Drexel, Manhattan Canisius, St. Peter's Iona, Quinnipiac Marist, Northern Kentucky Detroit Mercy, 8 o'clock UIC Green Bay, IUPUI Milwaukee, Big Ten Network Rutgers at Nebraska. Rutgers is a 6-point road favorite. If the season were to end today, Rutgers might be in the NCAA tournament, as crazy as that sounds. My rule for the major teams, the major 7 teams, is that to me 15 losses is too much, unless if that 15th loss comes in the conference tournament in a later round. So there's like some exceptions to the rule. So if the season were to end right now, Rutgers might be in the tournament. I'm going to take Nebraska getting the 6. I think this is a trap game for Rutgers. I won't be surprised if Nebraska wins outright. But giving Nebraska plus the 6, I'm going to call for the upset here because I don't think that Rutgers is going to win this game by more than 6, let alone outright. So giving Nebraska plus the 6, and I think Nebraska gives Rutgers a 0-1 start in conference play. Right, is that right? 0-1 in conference play. 1-2. They do have a conference win over Wisconsin at the RAC. 9 o'clock, Fox Sports 1, Georgetown Seton Hall's giving 6.5. This is a huge game. Both of these teams, Georgetown, I think, has the resume to be in the tournament. I think Georgetown will be there. Seton Hall, they've had some injuries and whatnot, and I think the committee, there's a chance they give them a pass, potentially, on some of those losses because some of their key players like Miles Powell weren't healthy. For example, their loss at Rutgers. And that's the case for Rutgers being in the NCAA tournament. You beat Seton Hall. But the case against that is that was a game where Miles Powell got the concussion. And obviously, we're going to talk some more college hoops as the year goes on. Next week, I'm going to start bringing my guests back on the podcast. Maybe I'll get on Jeff Maglicetti and we'll talk some Seton Hall and some Rutgers and talk about the locals in college basketball and just talk in general. But Seton Hall's giving 6.5. The game's on Fox Sports 1. I'm taking Georgetown plus the points. I think Seton Hall wins the game, but I think that the line's too high. So give me Georgetown plus the points. I think Seton Hall wins by 3. CBS Sports Network, Kent State against Bowling Green. Bowling Green is giving 1.5 at home. I'm going to take Bowling Green at home to win in the cover. I think it'll be a good game. Both these teams are off to good starts. The MAC isn't bad this year. There's those two teams. You have Buffalo, obviously. So give me Bowling Green minus the 1.5 here at home. 9 o'clock ESPNU. Tulsa hosts Temple. Temple's giving 2.5. Temple's off to a nice start. I think they're a candidate again at large. They have the new coach. I thought this was going to be a down year for Temple, but right now it looks like I'm wrong. And obviously Tulsa did not have a spectacular outside of conference season. Give me Temple minus the points. I think they'll get it done on the road. And then the last couple games on the docket for tonight are Cal Poly hosting Vanguard, Cal State Fullerton hosting St. Catherine, and Holy Names at UC Davis. Saturday's games, the games I'll be picking are going to be major conference games as well as teams involving ranked teams, and then the games that are on television. All right. Saturday, 12 o'clock, Fox Sports 1, Creighton Butler. And then the other thing I'm going to do now, going into this year, I started doing it at the end of last year, projecting lines. And then I'll look back on the podcast and see how I did with the projected line. I project Butler to be a 6.5, 7 point favorite. I would make Butler by 7 because I just think that Butler's a better team than Creighton. Butler has one loss on the whole year. I believe that came against Baylor, and Baylor's a good team. Creighton's going to make the tournament this year too. Like I said, this should be a good game. I think Butler will be a pretty big favorite because they're ranked. They're number 11. And I'm not so sold on Creighton, so I'll make the line Butler by 7. But I'll take Creighton to cover my projected spread, although I do think Butler will win the game. 12 o'clock on Fox, we have Indiana at number 15, Maryland. That should be a great game. I project Maryland to be around an 8-point favorite here. I think they'll win this game by double digits, so they'll cover my projected spread. And I'm not sold on Indiana being as good as Maryland. I do think Indiana could be a double-digit seed in the tournament, maybe even as high as an 8 if things were to break right. But this team's obviously better than last year. I think Archie Miller's done a good job this year so far. But they just have to avoid a bad conference season like last year. So I'm giving Maryland to win this game by double digits. ESPN 2, you have Oklahoma State at number 22, Texas Tech. I would make this line Tech by 10, and I think that they'll crush Oklahoma State. Because I just don't think Oklahoma State's that good. And meanwhile, Texas Tech had a disappointing sort of start to their season. They turned their season around with that upset win over Louisville at MSG and took off from there. So give me Texas Tech by double digits in that one, and I'd make that line Texas Tech by 10. 12 o'clock on ESPNU, LSU against Tennessee. I would make this line Tennessee by, because of the injuries, I would say Tennessee by 1, and I think LSU will go in there and win outright. I would just give Tennessee the -1 just for being home. I think LSU should be favored on a neutral over Tennessee because of the injuries on Tennessee. So give me LSU to win on the road. in Knoxville. ACC Network, Wake Forest against Pitt. I would make this line Pitt by 4.5, and I think that this will be a competitive game. I just think that Pitt will cover my projected 4.5 spread and win. And another thing about Pitt, I think that this could be an NCAA tournament team. They're 10-3 right now, so pretty good non-con. And then obviously they have the win over Florida State to start the season. They lost against West Virginia at home, but West Virginia is a good team, and they'll make the tournament. West Virginia is going to be a top 5 seed in the tournament in one of those brackets, so that's not a bad loss for Pitt. And I believe they lost to Rutgers, too, and Rutgers is actually decent this year as well. So give me Pitt to win this game, and they'll cover my projected number of 4.5. Akron, Eastern Michigan. You have those two good teams from the MAC. I'll just pick the winner of that game. I'm going to say that I would give Eastern Michigan -3 just for being home, and then I'd say Eastern Michigan would win that game. NC State against Clemson. NC State's off to a good start this year. I would make them a 1.5-point road favorite at Clemson. I think they'd win and cover that. 1 o'clock CBS, Georgia at number 9 Memphis. I think CBS is a giant loser for this. I'm sorry, CBS. You were banking on this being Anthony Edwards versus James Weissman. Now it's Anthony Edwards against the rest of the Memphis freshmen. Edwards is the best player on the court. I'd make Memphis an 8-point favorite in this game, and I think Memphis would win and cover that easily. They're the better team. Memphis should be proud of what it's done without James Weissman. There's a little bit of Ewing theory there, because the one loss they had came with Weissman on a neutral against Oregon. So, like I said, Memphis should be proud of what it's done. I think they'll get another quality win here. Georgia, I think, is a sneaky candidate to make the tournament as well. They're 9-3 on the year. We'll see how their season goes and SEC play and whatnot. So give me Memphis minus my projected 8.5 line. UMass Lowell and UMBC, Seattle, Chicago State, FDU, Bryant, Stanford, VMI, Wyoming, Colorado State, and MWC. That should be a fun game. I would make Colorado State a 3.5-point favorite. I think they'd win and cover that. They're 9-7 on the year. Western Carolina and the Citadel. Kansas State, Oklahoma is an interesting Big 12 game. I would make this Oklahoma by 4. And I think they'd win and cover that number. 2 o'clock, ESPN 2. Number 18, Florida State against number 7, Louisville. This is a fantastic game in the ACC. Both these teams are going to make the tournament. I would make Louisville a 7-point home favorite, and I think that they'll win the game, but I think Florida State will be competitive with Louisville, and I think they can backdoor them. So give me Florida State plus my projected 7, but Louisville will win the game. 2 o'clock on Fox, number 10, Villanova at Marquette. I'd make Villanova a 3-point road favorite, and I think they'd win and cover that. Villanova has turned their season around. They got a huge win over Kansas recently, and I think that they will keep the ball rolling. So give me Marquette to beat Marcus Howard and Marquette. Missouri, Kentucky, 2 o'clock on the SEC Network. I think that Kentucky will be like a 14-point favorite. I think Missouri might cover this because I could just see Kentucky playing a lot of random dudes in garbage time and not caring about the point spread. So I think Kentucky will win the game. I think Missouri will cover my projected line of 14. A great game on the ACC Network at 2 o'clock, Virginia Tech and number 19, Virginia. I'd make Virginia a 9-point home favorite here. I think they'll slow down Virginia Tech's offense. I think it was Virginia Tech last year where Virginia only allowed like 20 points against them, if I'm not mistaken. So you would expect Virginia Tech to perform better than that. I'd make this Virginia by 9, but I do think that Virginia wins this game by double digits. Big Ten Network, number 23, Iowa against number 21, Penn State. Both these teams are NCAA tournament bound. I would make Penn State a 3-point home favorite. I'm not super sold on Penn State being this great team. But because of home court advantage, I'll pick them to win the game and cover my projected number 3. ESPNU at 2 o'clock, UConn in South Florida. I would make this game South Florida by 1 at home, and I think they'll win and cover that 1. Providence, DePaul, 2 o'clock, Fox Sports 1. DePaul's off to a nice start. I think that the Big East could have up to 9 teams in the tournament. Providence has been the disappointing team this year in that conference. DePaul has been the biggest surprise. Arguably, St. John's could be the biggest surprise as well. They beat West Virginia, so they have a good win on their resume. And they beat Arizona as well, St. John's. And then DePaul's a couple big wins. I believe they beat Purdue, and I believe they beat somebody else that's decent as well. Might have been Wisconsin. I'd make DePaul a 5-point home favorite here, but I do think they'd win the game. But I think Providence will be competitive in this one because I think there's a lot of pressure on DePaul this year to make the tournament. So I think Providence will cover my projected number of 5, but DePaul will win the game. New Hampshire, Hartford, Georgia State, Coastal Carolina, Northern Illinois and Buffalo, Miami of Ohio, Central Michigan, Morgan State, Delaware State, CBS Sports Network, Long Island, and Mount St. Mary's. I would make this Mount St. Mary's by 2.5. LIU's been pretty good this year. I mean, for them. Mount St. Mary's has been a little disappointing. I think Long Island will win this game, so give me LIU plus the 2.5 that I project. North Texas and Marshall, Winthrop, Campbell, UC Irvine, and Harvard. Texas State and Arkansas State at 3 o'clock. South Alabama, UL Monroe. Abilene Christian, Lamar. Youngstown State, Cleveland State. Texas Arlington, Little Rock. Tennessee Sac Morehead State. Presbyterian, Gardner Webb. South Carolina Upstate, Longwood. 3:30, St. Francis, Pennsylvania, and Central Connecticut State. 4 o'clock, this is probably the best game of the day. I don't get why this is on ESPN+. They probably thought that West Virginia was going to suck. Number 16, West Virginia against number 3, Kansas. And this is another example of don't judge a college team on its previous season. Obviously, West Virginia was a big disappointment last year. This year, they're 11-1 with wins over Wichita State and Ohio State, so they're going to be back in the NCAA tournament as far as I'm concerned. Kansas has 2 losses, one of them coming against Duke in the season opener, and then the other one was against somebody else that's decent. I can't think of who on top of my head. I would make this line Kansas by 7. I think West Virginia will cover that projected number of 7. By the way, if the gambling line comes out and this is double digits, I think West Virginia's a no-brainer lock to cover. They normally show up for games like this when they're good. West Virginia's good. They won't win, but I think they'll be very competitive. I think Kansas wins by 3. So give me West Virginia plus my projected number of 7. ESPNU Ole Miss against number 24 Wichita State. I would make this line Wichita State by 6. I think they'd win and cover that. Wichita State has 1 loss on the year, and that's against West Virginia. I think Wichita State's going to be back in the tournament after a couple disappointing seasons. So give me Wichita State to cover my projected number of 6. Montana State, Southern Utah, Notre Dame, Syracuse on ESPN2. I think ESPN probably thought that these 2 teams were going to be good teams, but nope. I would give Syracuse a 3-point favorite because they're home. I would take Notre Dame plus the points. I think Notre Dame wins the game. Ohio and Western Michigan, UTEP and FAU. South Carolina State and Coppin State, Howard and Maryland Eastern. Robert Morris and Merrimack. Merrimack's been a pleasant surprise this year in the NEC. Middle Tennessee, Charlotte. Florida A&M, NC Central. Jacksonville State, Eastern Kentucky. James Madison, Charleston. Alon Hofstra. Liberty, NJIT. I think Liberty's a couple of wins away from being ranked. Albany, Binghamton. CBS Sports Network, Cincinnati, and Tulane. I would make Tulane a 1-point home favorite over a disappointing Cincinnati team, and I think Tulane would win and cover that number. And Cincinnati will probably be favored in this game, but I think that Tulane is a team that is going to be around in the AAC this year, and they won't make the tournament or anything like that. They'll make one of those small tournaments like the CBI or something like that. But I think Ron Hunter's going to do a good job there. So give me Tulane in that one. East Tennessee State and Furman. That's a fantastic game in the SoCon Conference. I would make Furman a 2-point home favorite here. I think they will win and cover that number. Georgia Southern and App State, William & Mary Northeastern, Illinois State Southern Illinois, McNeese Central Arkansas State, number 8 Auburn at Mississippi State. I would make Auburn a 4-point road favorite here. This is obviously a trap game. I think this is a candidate for Auburn to get picked off. I would take Auburn minus the points. My -4, I think they win this game by 8 or 9 points, although I think it's competitive. Southeast Louisiana and Texas A&M Corpus Christi, Tennessee Martin Austin Peay, Stetson Kennesaw State, High Point Radford, Chattanooga Mercer, North Florida, North Alabama, 5 o'clock Pac-12 Network, number 4 Oregon against Utah. I would make Oregon a 2-point road favorite. I think this is a good bounce back spot after a loss at Colorado. This is a big game for Utah. If Utah wins this game, I think that they'll be in the tournament. I think Colorado is going to make it. I think there's a chance Utah makes it. If Utah loses this game, I still think that they're in play. First spot, because I think there's multiple opportunities for them coming up. They have to play Oregon again. Washington, who's been disappointing, though. Arizona, USC. So there's good teams in the conference. Colorado as well. So give me Oregon minus the 2. I think this is a bounce back spot for them. Rice, Western Kentucky, Southern Miss, Louisiana Tech, Arkansas Pine Bluff, and Mississippi Valley State. Let's see if Valley State gets their first win. SIU Edwardsville and Tennessee State, San Diego, Santa Clara. Santa Clara has been a pleasant surprise in the WCC this season. Portland State, Eastern Washington, 5:15 Eastern Illinois and Belmont. Western Illinois, South Dakota State, 6 o'clock St. Catherine and Cal State Northridge. Alabama State, Jackson State, CBS Sports Network, Boise State at Nevada. I think Nevada's been disappointing compared to last year. Boise's been okay. I would make Nevada -3 at home, and I think they'll win that game and cover that projected number. Indiana State, Drake, 6 o'clock ESPN2, Alabama against Florida. Florida's been a huge disappointment this year in my mind. I think they have to have a good conference run to make the tournament. I would make Florida a 6.5-point home favorite here. I just don't believe in Alabama. I think Florida will make a statement here and remind people what they're capable of. So give me Florida minus my projected 6.5. Weber State, Northern Arizona, ACC Network, Georgia Tech at North Carolina. North Carolina has been a big disappointment this year. Obviously, Cole Anthony might be out for the season. There's a chance he comes back. I would make Carolina here a 8-point home favorite. I think Georgia Tech would cover that number, but North Carolina would win the game. Iowa State against TCU. I would make TCU a 2.5-point home underdog. So my line would be Iowa State minus 2.5. I think that Iowa State needs to have a big conference season. They're a team that's under immense pressure, like North Carolina and like Florida and a couple other teams. Washington. There's a couple I could just rattle off as well. So give me Iowa State minus my projected number of 2.5. Charleston Southern and Hampton. Alcorn State, Prairie View at 6:30. Bethune-Cookman, Norfolk State, Nichols, Sam Houston State. Alabama A&M, Grambling, 7 o'clock. UTSA, FIU. FIU's been good this year. Princeton, Penn, Lipscomb, Florida Gulf Coast. Texas A&M at surprising 11-1 Arkansas on the SEC Network. I'd make this line Arkansas by 3.5. I think they win and cover that. They've been fantastic in year one under Eric Musselman. I think this is a team that's going to make the tournament now. I think Musselman is the easy pick for the SEC Coach of the Year. This reminds me of Ole Miss a few years ago when Kermit Davis took over for them and was a pleasant surprise. And then a few years ago it was Tennessee. That was a big surprise. So it feels like every year over the last 4 we've had that amazing, unexpected, surprisingly good team in the SEC. I know LSU last year was an example as well with Will Wade. There's a couple I can list on top of my head. Auburn a few years ago. So give me Arkansas minus the 3.5, and I think that Buzz Williams is in for a bit of a long year at A&M in year one. UNC Greensboro at Wofford. And Greensboro, obviously, a solid team from the SoCon Wofford upset Carolina, so they're not bad. UAB Old Dominion. Sacred Heart Wagner Towson, UNC Wilmington. UCLA at Washington State. I would make UCLA a 1-point road favorite. They obviously just picked off Washington on the road. I think this is a letdown spot, and I would take Washington State to get a big win in conference. Valpo, Evansville, San Jose State, Fresno State. This is not a great game whatsoever. I would make Fresno State a 4-point favorite at home. I think they'd cover that. Savin F. Austin, New Orleans, 7:30, Cal State, Los Angeles at Long Beach State. 8 o'clock, ESPN, number 2 Duke at Miami. I would make Duke a 3.5-point road favorite. This is obviously a trap game. I don't get how they were giving 7 at Virginia Tech, but they ended up covering that anyway a few weeks ago. I think Duke will cover by 3.5, but I think this is a competitive game. I won't be surprised if Miami has a lead in this game in the second half. So, give me Duke minus 3.5, but at the same time, I won't be surprised at all if Miami picks them off and wins outright. A huge Big 12 game on ESPN2. Texas at number 6 Baylor. Both these teams have been really, really good. I would make Baylor a 6-point home favorite against Shaka Smart's team, and then I would take Texas plus the 6, but I do think that Baylor wins the game. ESPNU Bradley in Northern Iowa. This is an excellent game in the Mountain Valley. Northern Iowa, I think, is an at-large candidate. They obviously played West Virginia but lost, and then I forget who their other loss was against. And Bradley's been solid as well, and I think Bradley made the tournament last year, if I'm not mistaken. Bradley's a program that's come a long way. I remember they were the doormats of that conference a few years ago, and now they're a contender in that conference. So it's amazing how fast it could change in college basketball sometimes. I would make Northern Iowa a 7-point home favorite. I just am not a fan of this Bradley team, really, and I'm not sold on them. So I'd make it Northern Iowa by 7. Maybe I'm judging Northern Iowa because they played well against West Virginia in the Cancun tournament, and then they beat South Carolina. So I would take Bradley plus my projected number of 7, but Northern Iowa would win. I think it's a good game. Missouri State at Loyola Chicago. San Diego Christian at UC Riverside. Oral Roberts at Omaha. Utah Valley UMKC. Southeast Missouri State, Murray State, Troy, Louisiana. 8:30 Southern, Texas Southern. 9 o'clock Loyola Marymount BYU. Montana Northern Colorado. SMU Vanderbilt. I would make SMU a 1-point dog, and I think they win the game outright. Arizona State at number 25 Arizona, 9:30 Pac-12 Network. I would make Zona a 5-point home favorite. I'm very disappointed in Bobby Hurley's team this year. I thought this team was going to be good, but Utah, Oregon, and USC have been the more surprising teams in this conference this year. I would take Arizona minus my number of 5. I think Arizona's the more talented team. Arizona's a team with a chip on its shoulder in conference play. They lost to St. John's. They want to get that off their shoulders a little bit. So give me Arizona minus my projected number of 5. 10 o'clock ESPN2, Pepperdine at number 1 Gonzaga. I'd make Gonzaga a 27.5-point favorite. I think that Pepperdine would cover that number, but Gonzaga would obviously win. CBS Sports Network number 13, San Diego State at Utah State. I think this is the game of the early year in the Mountain West Conference. I would make San Diego State a 1.5-point road favorite. I'm going to take Utah State to pull off the home upset here. I won't be surprised if Utah State's actually favored in this game. I'm going to take San Diego State here. And I think that, I'm going to take Utah State here. And I think that the fans will storm the court and they'll finally get a signature win in conference and hand San Diego State their first loss. And then that would leave Auburn as the only remaining undefeated team. Air Force UNLV on ESPNU. I would make UNLV a 5.5 point favorite. I would take Air Force catching the 5.5, but I do think UNLV will win. Grand Canyon, Cal State Bakersfield. St. Mary's Pacific's a good game, so I'll make up a line here. I'd make St. Mary's a 5-point road favorite. I think they covered that. They had a good win last night. I think they'll follow it up here with another good performance and win over a solid Pacific team. So give me St. Mary's -5. San Francisco, Portland, New Mexico State, Cal Baptist. That's an interesting game in the WAC. Cal Baptist has been a surprise. New Mexico State kind of faltered in non-con play. So we'll see what happens there. Idaho State, Sacramento State is the last game for Saturday. Sunday, not as big as the schedule. 12 o'clock, you have Richmond at Rhode Island. I'd make Rhode Island the 1.5 point home favorite. I think they win and cover that. VCU, George Mason's a very good game on NBC Sports Network. I'd make VCU a 2-point road favorite. I think that they'll get it done. And by the way, George Mason's another really good team from the A-10. Navy, Holy Cross, 1 o'clock, number 20, Dayton at St. Joe's. I'd make this Dayton by... They're favored by 10.5 at LaSalle. And LaSalle isn't terrible. St. Joe's is terrible this year. So I'd make this Dayton by 16. And I think that they'd cover that. Because I think Dayton is really good, led by Obi Toppin. Wright State, Detroit Mercy. Stony Brook, Maine. Manhattan, Niagara. 1:30 CBS. Number 12 Michigan against number 14 Michigan State. This is a great game. Rivalry game. I'd make the Spartans a 2.5 point home favorite. That was an impressive win over Illinois last night. Michigan has kind of faltered after that hot start. I would take MSC minus my 2.5 line. Davidson, Duquesne, 2 o'clock NBCSN. Duquesne has been a pleasant surprise in the A-10. Meanwhile, Davidson has been a mega disappointment at 6-6. I would make Duquesne a 2.5 point home favorite, and I think Duquesne will win and cover that number. LaSalle, Fordham, Siena Ryder, Fairfield, Canisius, Iona, Monmouth, IUPUI, Green Bay, Loyola, Maryland, Lehigh, Bucknell, Lafayette, UIC, Milwaukee, Marist, St. Peter's, Northland, North Dakota State, Northern Kentucky, Oakland at 3 o'clock, Boston University and American, 4 o'clock St. Bonaventure, George Washington, NBCSN, UMass, and St. Louis. I'd make St. Louis a 7-point home favorite. I think that they'd win and cover that. 4:30 Denver and South Dakota. A big game on Fox in the Big East. St. John's at Xavier. I'd make Xavier a 6.5 point home favorite. St. John's had a somewhat heartbreaking loss against Butler. They're getting blown out, and they came back and took the lead, and then Butler ended up winning the game. That was, I believe, earlier in the week. I think this is a letdown for St. John's. I think Xavier needs to get a nice win to get back in the rankings, and I think this is a good opportunity for them. So give me Xavier minus my projected number of 6.5. Houston Baptist, Northwestern State at 5. 5:30 Purdue, Fort Wayne in North Dakota. 6 o'clock ESPNU, Oregon State at Colorado. That's an excellent game. I make Colorado a 7-point home favorite here. I'm not sold on Oregon State. They've just lost at Utah. I think that they get blown out here again. No letdown for Colorado. So give me Colorado -7, and I know I'm going to be regretting betting on Colorado on Sunday. Because you could argue letdown spot Colorado or the Oregon State isn't that good. You know what? I'm changing my mind. I'm going to take Oregon State plus my 7. I've never changed my mind on a podcast before regarding a pick, but I'm going to do it here. So give me Oregon State plus my projected number 7. I do think Colorado will win straight up, though. 7:30 Big Ten Network, Northwestern and Minnesota. I would make Minnesota a 3-point home favorite here. I think they'd win and cover that and bounce back from their loss against Purdue. And Purdue's at Illinois, 8 o'clock Fox Sports 1. I would make Purdue a 1.5 point road favorite. I would take Illinois getting the points in a bounce back spot at home, and they'll win the game outright. 10 o'clock, Fox Sports 1, USC and Washington. I would make Washington a 4-point home favorite. This is a bounce-back spot for them, and I think they'll win and cover my projected number of 4. All right, that was a while on college basketball. Now we'll do NBA. We'll just go over last night's slate and look ahead to the weekend. There's a lot of games last night for a Thursday. Hornets over Cavs 109-106. Charlotte 14-23. Cleveland 10-24. Nuggets over the Pacers 124-116. Michael Porter Jr. had his coming out party last night. Denver 24-10. Pacers 22-13. Heat over the Raptors 84-76. Heat 25-9. Toronto 23-12. Timberwolves over the Warriors 99-84. Minnesota 13-21. Golden State 9-27. Jazz over the Bulls 102-98, so the Jazz barely cover. Utah 22-12. Chicago 13-22. Mavs over the Nets 123-111. Mavs didn't have Kristaps Porzingis or Tim Hardaway Jr. Nets obviously didn't have Kyrie Irving or Karis LeVert. Dallas 22-12. Brooklyn 16-17. Thunder over the Spurs 109-103. Thunder 19-15. San Antonio 14-19. Kings over the Grizzlies 128-123. Kings 13-22. Memphis 13-22. Clippers over the Pistons 126-112. Clippers 25-11. Paul George got hurt last night with a shoulder injury. Detroit 12-23. Tonight we have 6 games. 7 o'clock you have the Heat at the Magic, the Trailblazers at the Wizards, the Hawks at the Celtics. 8 o'clock ESPN. 76ers at the Rockets. The Rockets are giving 4. I think this is a no-brainer. I'm taking Houston minus a 4. Philly is bad on the road. They're under 500 on the road. I just think they're giving Philly a little bit too much credit, although they are telling you that the Rockets are 1 point better than the Sixers on a neutral. So giving the Rockets minus the 4, as James Harden and Russell Westbrook will get a big win over an East team. 9 o'clock, Knicks at the Suns. 10:30 ESPN. Pelicans, Lakers. Lakers given 11. I'm taking New Orleans plus the 11. I know LeBron and AD are both going to play. I just think that Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram and company, Josh Hart, they'll all have big games. I won't be dumbfounded if New Orleans wins outright. If they can win at Denver, they can win at the Lakers. That's the bottom line. But the Lakers are better than the Nuggets, as we know. I just think that the Lakers win this game by 7. And I would make this line Lakers by, 7.5. I just think that this line is off. And no Zion yet for New Orleans, obviously. I think J.J. Redick has a big game in his return to Staples Center. So, give me the Pelicans plus the 11, although I think that the Lakers will win the game. Best bet, I'm going to go with the Rockets minus the 4. All due respect to New York getting 6.5. They've been really good under Mike Miller after they fired David Fizdale. 6-6 under Mike Miller. I think this is a winnable game at the Suns. That's an honorable mention for my best NBA bet, but I really do love the Rockets minus 4. I think it's a no-brainer, barring a random injury that the Rockets can ill afford to have. Saturday, 3:30 Grizzlies, Clippers. 6 o'clock Raptors, Nets. 7 o'clock Jazz, Magic. 7:30 Thunder, Cavs, Pacers, Hawks. 8 o'clock Celtics, Bulls, Nuggets, Wizards. 8:30 Pistons, Warriors. Spurs, Bucks. Hornets, Mavs. 10 o'clock Pelicans at the Kings. And then on Sunday, 3:30 Knicks, Clippers. 6 o'clock Trailblazers, Heat. 7:30 Timberwolves, Cavs. 8 o'clock Grizzlies, Suns. 10 o'clock Pistons, Lakers. So Staples Center has a double dip on Sunday. All right, now we'll talk some NHL. We'll go over last night's games and look ahead to the weekend. Blue Jackets over the Bruins 2-1 in overtime on a goal by Pierre-Luc Dubois. Columbus 19-14-8. Boston 24-7-11. Sabres over the Oilers 3-2 in overtime on a goal by Jack Eichel on a penalty shot. Buffalo back over 500, 18-17-7. Edmonton 21-17-5. Lightning over the Canadiens 2-1. Tampa 22-13-4. Montreal 18-17-6. Devils over the Islanders 2-1. A nice win for New Jersey on the road. 15-19-6. Islanders 25-11-3. And lost a key defenseman for the season. Sharks over the Penguins 3-2 in overtime on a goal by Brett Burns. San Jose 18-21-3. Pittsburgh 24-11-5. Panthers over the Senators 6-3. Panthers 21-14-5. Ottawa 16-20-5. Maple Leafs over the Jets 6-3. Toronto's turned their season around since they fired Mike Babcock. 23-14-5. Winnipeg 22-16-3. Coyotes over the Ducks 4-2. The Coyotes 23-16-4. Anaheim 16-20-5. Flames over the Rangers 4-3. Flames 21-17-5. Rangers 19-17-4. Avalanche over the Blues 7-3 on national TV. 24-13-4 the Avs. St. Louis 26-10-6. Canucks over the Blackhawks 7-5. Vancouver 22-15-4. Chicago 18-18-6. And Golden Knights over the Flyers 5-4. Big win for Vegas 23-15-6. So they turned their season around. Philly 22-14-5. Only 2 games tonight. 7:30 Capitals Hurricanes. 8:30 Red Wings Stars. Busy slate on Saturday. 1 o'clock Oilers Bruins. Sharks Blue Jackets. Panthers Sabres. 2 o'clock Jets Wild. 4 o'clock Blues Golden Knights. 7 o'clock Islanders Maple Leafs. So John Tavares against his ex-team. Penguins Canadians. Lightning Senators. Avalanche Devils. Flyers Coyotes at 8. 10 o'clock Rangers Canucks. 10:30 Predators Kings. Sunday. Smaller slate. 12:30 Sharks Capitals. 5 o'clock Panthers Penguins. Lightning Hurricanes. 7 o'clock Flames Wild. 7:30 NBC has said Red Wings Blackhawks. I think Chicago will win that game. The Red Wings are the worst team in the league. 10 o'clock Predators Ducks. I think that the Ducks will pick off Nashville at home and get a nice win to for them to feel good about themselves. Now I'm going to talk about some firings in college football and the NFL, respectively. We're going to start with the most recent one in college football. That is Joe Moorhead of Mississippi State, who was let go. Not surprised. I thought that they would have done this a month ago, but here we are. There are rumors that he was going to leave for Rutgers and other potential schools, but he's out. And there should be some interesting guys that should be available and whatnot. An interesting candidate in my mind that's really got himself on the map is Steve Ensminger, who's the LSU offensive coordinator. And if you want to talk about current head coaches, maybe somebody like Tom Allen of Indiana. Another one could potentially be somebody like PJ Fleck, but I don't think he'd leave Minnesota after the year they had. I'm not sure if they'll go this route because this person's from a service academy, but Troy Calhoun of Air Force, I think, is up to his stock. Despite a disappointing year, sort of. Gary Anderson of Utah State. Somebody else that's interesting to me is Rocky Long of San Diego State. I don't know if they'll go that route. Obviously, Mike Norvell took Florida State, so he's off the board. That's the only big one from a AAC school that moved, or from a Group of 5. But App State's coach is now with Missouri. Another interesting one in my mind is the head coach of Louisiana Lafayette, who really has upped his stock this season after going 11-2 in the regular, or 11-3. Elia Drinkwitz went to Missouri. Billy Napier is someone that I think is really interesting. He's obviously the coach I was thinking about from Louisiana. Lance Leopold of Buffalo, although his stock dropped after a season that's not as good as last year. So I think that the Spartans have options here. And now we'll talk about the NFL. We're just going to go around the league pretty much. We'll start in the AFC East, where the Jets decided to keep Adam Gase. I don't think there'll be any other coaching changes in that division. AFC North, the Browns fired Freddie Kitchens. That was no surprise. That was the biggest disappointment team in the NFL this season after acquiring Odell Beckham Jr., and they couldn't even avoid a losing season. So he deserved to go. AFC South, Doug Marrone saved his job with the Jaguars somehow. Tom Coughlin ended up getting the axe there. The AFC West, Anthony Lynn, I think, is still in play to be fired. Vic Fangio saved his job by having a good second half of the season with the Broncos. NFC East, there's three big changes. Obviously, the first one was Jay Gruden back in October. And then Bill Callahan was the intern guy, and they hired Ron Rivera to be their permanent head coach. And then he brought in Jack Del Rio to be his defensive coordinator. Good hire by the Redskins. Obviously, Rivera had a lot of success with the Panthers, but time had run its course, so they let him go. In Carolina, the Giants fired Pat Shurmur. That's no surprise. 9 wins in 2 seasons in New York isn't going to cut it. And the one that everybody's been waiting for, the Cowboys have finally fired Jason Garrett after nearly a decade as head coach. I think that there's going to be a lot of big names in play for this job, but watch them ultimately land with Josh McDaniels. I don't think Josh McDaniels is good enough for the Cowboys head coaching job at all. I think the Cowboys need a brand name, like an Urban Meyer or Lincoln Riley or Dan Mullen or... I mean, this is a long shot because he's obviously still coaching right now and coaching for a team that's in the playoffs, Bill Belichick. There's scenarios out there if they lose in the wild card game tomorrow night. Maybe the Brady rumors of him leaving will come up, and then maybe Belichick resigns and goes to either Dallas or the Giants to have like a second phase of his career. So in terms of the Giants, Matt Rule, I think, is in play for their job, and I think he's going to actually get the job. I think that the obvious ties to him in the organization. He coached under Tom Coughlin with the Giants in 2012. I think he's somebody that's gotten a lot out of his teams at Baylor and at Temple. And I think he'd be a nice hire there. And in terms of Dallas, I think it's going to end up being a big name. I just don't know who. I don't think it'll be Urban Meyer, but I think it could be Lincoln Riley. It could be Dan Mullen. The Dan Mullen thing's intriguing because that was Prescott's college coach. But I do think Dallas will get a brand star name for the first time since Bill Parcells back in 2005 or 2006, whenever it was when he was their coach. In the NFC North, the Bears decided to keep Matt Nagy. I think their little hot run at the end of the season saved his and Ryan Pace's job, as well as a little bit of improvement from Mitch Trubisky after a slow start to the season. Matt Patricia somehow saved his job with the Lions. If Minnesota's bounced this weekend or gets blown out, I would not rule out the idea of Mike Zimmer. But we'll see. NFC South, obviously the Panthers move on from Ron Rivera. They're interviewing Matt Rule, Josh McDaniels. I don't think they'll get Rule. I think the Rule to the Giants is almost like a lock at this point, borderline lock. I think Mike McCarthy's in play for Carolina as well as Dallas. And I think Mike McCarthy is like an interesting guy for Dallas. It's like the big name star coach. It kind of fits what I'm looking for. But his name obviously isn't flashy like Urban Meyer's is. But what's good about McCarthy is that he was a good coach with the Packers, but I just think Aaron Rodgers got sick and tired of him and time had run its course for him at Green Bay. It's the same case with Ron Rivera with the Panthers. Like, time had run its course. And Dan Quinn saved his job in Atlanta after a nice second half. And then in the NFC West, obviously Kyle Shanahan saved his job this year by making the playoffs and getting that 1 seed in the NFC. I think Pete Carroll will be back again next year. If they lose in the playoffs, I won't be dumbfounded if Pete Carroll resigns or something. Cliff Kingsbury, that could be a hot seat guy for next year if Kyler Murray doesn't take the next step. And Sean McVay, I think, is obviously safe despite a very, very disappointing season from the Rams. Now I'm going to do a new segment called What We Know and Questions Abound. I'm going to call it. So I'm going to go through the NFL playoff teams. That's going to be the theme of the day. And talk about what we know and what questions we have. So we're going to start with the AFC East winner, the New England Patriots. What we know about the New England Patriots is that Tom Brady, father time has caught up to him. It's just reality. We saw it last year in the regular season, but it was masked because of a Super Bowl run. But in the second half of this year, it really started to show. I mean, he threw a pick 6 against the Dolphins. He really hasn't been the same, and they didn't blow out some teams. So it should be interesting to see if he defeats Father Time or not, but I'm not so sure. And my question for New England is this the final game for Tom Brady in Foxborough? That's a question I have that has to be answered, and we'll find out. The AFC North winner, the Baltimore Ravens. What we know about the Baltimore Ravens is the Lamar Jackson, and that as long as he stays healthy, is going to be around for a very, very long time. That guy really is something special. We haven't seen somebody like this probably since RG3 when he was a rookie. So should be interesting to see how Lamar in the playoffs is going to look. Will he look like Lamar from last year, or will he look like Lamar from this year, which leads me to my question for them. It doesn't involve Lamar, it involves the offensive weapons around Lamar Jackson. Is how much will they step up? Because there's a lack of experience. Guys like Mark Andrews and Hollywood Brown have not been in big games before. Mark Ingram obviously was with the Saints, so he's had the big game experience. But the other guys have not, and we'll see how much that plays into it in their playoff run. Now up the AFC South winner, the Houston Texans. What we know about the Houston Texans is that their offense outlook is different depending on Will Fuller's health. When Will Fuller is healthy, he's their number 2 receiver, but that's just facts. Their offense is good. Without Will Fuller, their offense is not as good. But my question with the Texans involves star defensive stud J.J. Watt. He's coming back for the playoffs after his injury. My question is, how much of a factor will J.J. Watt be coming off this injury? AFC West winners, the Kansas City Chiefs. What we know about the Kansas City Chiefs is that Patrick Mahomes was not a one-year wonder. Yes, he did get injured this year, but after his injury, once he came back, he started to look like the Patrick Mahomes of old. and he's somebody that's going to be around for a very long time. My question for the Chiefs involves their defense and whether that end of the season stretch of good play by the Chiefs defense was a fluke or not. We'll learn that in the playoffs, and that's my question for them. The wild card, number 1, the Buffalo Bills. What we know about the Bills is that they are very, very well coached, and they are very undisciplined. Sean McDermott is one of the more underrated coaches in the NFL. I'm going to do coach power rankings at some point this month in the NFL, and he'll certainly be in the top 10 because he's gotten a lot out of his team while he's been there. And I was very surprised to see him on hot seat lists coming into this season. I just think that ownership is a little bit impatient, but credit to them for sticking with McDermott and not panicking and firing him after 2 seasons, after a disappointing year last year. But now here they are in the playoffs. So what we know about them, again, is that they're very well coached and they're very undisciplined. My question for the Bills is Josh Allen and whether his little run in big games of having success continues. I'm curious to see if the moment will catch up to him. Obviously, it did not on Thanksgiving against the Cowboys, and despite losing against New England, he stepped up in that game as well. So I'm interested to see if the moment is too big for Josh Allen or not. And the last wildcard team is the Tennessee Titans. What we know about the Titans is that Ryan Tannehill changed the outlook of their team's season. Had he been starting the year as the quarterback, they would have won that division probably over the Texans. So that is, to me, the what we know about the Titans and then the sort of what if as well. But my question for them is their defense and whether it can get big stops in big spots. And we'll learn on Saturday, and that factors into the Patriots a little bit as well. So that's, to me, the most interesting game of the wild card round for a variety of reasons. To the NFC side of things, the NFC East winner, the Philadelphia Eagles. What we know about the Eagles is that this is a resilient bunch of guys, a group that has been there and done that for the most part, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And their defense has drastically improved over the last few weeks after a slow start. And my question for Philadelphia is whether their offensive weapon replacements, assuming that they'll be missing guys again, such as the likes of Greg Ward Jr. and Boston Scott, will these guys step up when it matters in a big spot? So that's my question for Philadelphia. The NFC North winner is the Green Bay Packers. What we know about the Green Bay Packers is that their defensive moves in the offseason have paid off. It's a big reason why that they won the division this year, and it stepped up in the biggest game of the season at Minnesota to help clinch that division. But my question for Green Bay is the weapons around Aaron Rodgers and whether they're capable of stepping up in big spots. Other than Devontae Adams, and Jimmy Graham, I don't think any of their key offensive weapons have been in big games before. So I'm interested to see how that offense responds, especially those secondary type of players like Marquez Valdez-Scantling or Alan Lazard, Mercedes Lewis, guys that have never been in big games. Aaron Jones I don't think's played in a big game. So should be very interesting to see how that plays out. NFC South winner, the New Orleans Saints. What we know about the New Orleans Saints is that Drew Brees is still playing at a very, very high level and getting a lot out of guys on his team. But my question for New Orleans is their defense and whether it's going to be healthy enough. They've had some injuries in the pass rush. They made some interesting additions in the secondary with guys like Janoris Jenkins. And I'm not so sure that Jenkins is going to be a difference maker. I'm not sold in their secondary other than Marshawn Lattimore, really. So my question for them is their defense and whether it's going to be healthy enough to get big stops when it matters. The NFC West winner was the San Francisco 49ers. What we know about this bunch is this is a resilient bunch of players, a very well-coached team, a team that is realistically 3 plays away from being undefeated. And don't forget, obviously, they lost by 3 at Baltimore on a game-winning field goal by Justin Tucker. They lost in overtime against Seattle on a game-ending field goal. And then they lost against the... they did lose one more game. I can't think of what it was. And it was obvious that it was close, but I can't really think. Or did they go 14-2? I really don't remember. I thought they went 13-3, but we'll see. But obviously they were a few plays away from being 13-3. I was right. Oh, Atlanta. They lost at home against Atlanta on that last-second touchdown by Julio Jones. So they're realistically 3 plays away from being undefeated. So you can make a case this is the safest bet to win the Super Bowl, and that does include the Ravens. So we know that the 49ers are a resilient and confident bunch of players and really have a chance to go on a Super Bowl run. And my question with the Niners is their defense and whether their defense from the early part of the season will return rather than the last couple weeks of the season where they're giving up big point totals such as to New Orleans and the Rams and the end of that Seahawks game where the Seahawks made it interesting. So I have some questions about the 49ers defense and whether it'll return to early season form or not. Wild cards, the 5 seeds, the Seattle Seahawks. What we know about the Seahawks is Russell Wilson. That guy is a bad man. That guy just knows how to win games, no matter who's on the roster. And that guy's just a flat-out winner. And I really think that he's somewhat underappreciated. And I think that there's a lot of people that feel that this was a fluke year and Russell Wilson single-handedly carried them to the playoffs, which I am kind of leading in that direction. But I just feel that Russell Wilson deserves all the love and attention right now for bringing his team to where they are. And my question involving the Seahawks is what I just mentioned. Will luck finally run out for them? They were lucky to win a lot of these close games, most notably that game where the Rams missed the field goal. Had the Rams won that game, they would have been 10-6, and in Seattle would have probably still been the 5 seed because Minnesota was 10-6 and Seattle was 11-5. I think. Let's see what Seattle's record was in the regular season. Seattle went 11-5, and had they lost that game, they would have been 10-6. They still would have been the 5 seed because the Vikings were also 10-6 and they beat the Vikings. And that was another close game that they won at home against the Vikings. The overtime game against San Francisco. So my question for them is, will luck finally run out on the Seahawks? And that obviously would mean that they lose in a close game against Philly or in a blowout against Philly. But if they win a close game against Philly, then the luck continues. If they blow out Philly, then this team's people are still going to be making comments and stuff because Philly isn't healthy and they're not as good as they were the last 2 years. So there's a lot of questions around the Seahawks, obviously. And then last but not least, the second wild card in the NFC, the Minnesota Vikings. What we know about the Minnesota Vikings, their defense is not what it was that's just reality. Their offense has carried them this year more than their defense. Xavier Rhodes is somebody that's really not as good as he once was. This is mainly their secondary rather than their pass rush. Danielle Hunter's had a good year and is in the Pro Bowl. Everson Griffin's in a contract year, and he's had a nice season. But their secondary isn't what it once was. And I think that has to be known. But my question for them, will Kirk Cousins finally win a game when it matters? I know they won at Dallas, but let's be honest, Jason Garrett was still the head coach of the Cowboys. They lost on Monday Night Football in Seattle, not Cousins' fault whatsoever. That was more on the defense, and that was the game where it kind of dawned on me that their defense really isn't the same. And then the Cowboy game, too, obviously, was the other game that kind of dawned on me as well, because the Cowboys, I think, should have won that game. But to me, my question is still Cousins. Will he go toe-to-toe with New Orleans' offense? I think that you can make a case they have better weapons than New Orleans. But the only edges where New Orleans would have on offense other than quarterback are Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, potentially. But Kamara didn't have a great season until these last few weeks, and Dalvin Cook's injured. So you would say edge Kamara because of Cook's injury, and Cook's supposed to be back. And then wide receiver, Michael Thomas is the best wide receiver on the field, but the Vikings have the second and third best wide receivers. So, and then tight end, I'd give the edge to Kyle Rudolph, although Jared Cook's had a nice year for New Orleans. So it should be very interesting to see how Cousins plays. And without further ado, here are my picks for Wild Card Weekend of the NFL. We're going to start with the first game on the slate, which is the Bills at the Texans. This should be an interesting game. I call this the Bill O'Brien Invitational because the Texans are always in this spot and have been under Bill O'Brien for a while now. The Texans are giving 2.5. The over-under is 43.5. And even the Texans were in this spot before Bill O'Brien started there. And that's another coach that I think is coaching for his job potentially and could lose his job with a playoff defeat. The Texans are given a number of 2.5. The over-under is 43.5. The Bills are coming off a season-closing loss against the Jets in a game which it didn't matter. Texans, same thing. Game didn't matter to them. They lost at home against the Titans, a game that the Titans had to have. Josh Allen, this is his first playoff game. Deshaun Watson, this is his second playoff game. Will Fuller's health is huge for the Texans, and whether he's right or not. J.J. Watt, how will he look? That was my main question for them. The Bills have a really good pass rush and a solid secondary. And guess what? I think the Bills are going to win this game outright. They're getting 2.5. They're plus 125 on the money line. So give me the Buffalo Bills to win this game by a score of 23-16. That would mean the under would hit as well, which is the over-under is 43.5. 8 o'clock CBS. Titans, Patriots. Patriots giving 5 over-under 44.5. Titans coming off a season-ending win at home on the road and in Houston against the Texans, my bad. The Patriots coming off a last-second home loss against the Dolphins, which dropped into this spot. Tom Brady has not been the same quarterback as he once was. The Titans, meanwhile, have been red hot. Ryan Tannehill leading the way. Guess what, guys? I'm picking the Titans. Getting 5. Plus 180 on the money line. Plus 190 on the money line. I think they're going to win outright. And I'm going to say Tennessee wins this game 27-20. I think Ryan Tannehill will step up. Derrick Henry's going to go nuts. He'll be the best player in the game. And I think that Father Time will hit for Tom Brady. I think that the Patriot fans, it's going to be emotional for them because it'll be Brady's last game for the Patriots. So give me the Titans plus 5, and I think they win the game outright at plus 190. 1 o'clock on Fox. Joe Buck, Schraikman, Aaron Andrews on the call. Saints giving 8 over under 49.5. The Vikings are coming off a season-closing loss at home against the Bears in which none of the regulars played. Saints coming off a win over the Carolina Panthers. They played everybody thinking they had a chance at the bye, but Packers came back and beat the Lions, so that was that. I am taking the Minnesota Vikings getting to 8, but I do think New Orleans will win the game. I think it'll be close. I think this is a shootout. I think Kirk Cousins will have a nice game. I think that he can throw on the Saints secondary. I think Thielen and Diggs will have big games. I think the Vikings are secretly live in this game, but I don't think they'll win. I think it's going to be like a classic Vikings crushing season-ending loss. Just like the last time they played in New Orleans for a playoff game where Brett Favre threw that interception. I think there's a chance Kirk Cousins throws a late pick in the game to seal the win for New Orleans. I'm going to say that the Saints win this game 35 to 33. I think the Vikings are going to be marching down the field trying to get that field goal from Dan Bailey. Either Dan Bailey misses a potential game-winning field goal or Kirk Cousins throws a late game pick to Marshawn Lattimore for the Saints to win. So give me +8 with the Vikings, and I love the over 49.5 as well, but I feel better about the +8 because I think the Vikings are going to hang around in this game. 4:40 on NBC, Chris Collinsworth, Al Michaels, Michelle Tafoya, Seahawks, Eagles, Seahawks giving 1.5 over under 45. The Seahawks are coming off a loss against the Niners in their season finale on Sunday Night Football. And now they're in the wild card spot rather than division champs. Had they finished off that drive at the end of the game, they'd be playing the Vikings, and the Niners would be at the Eagles, and the two byes would be New Orleans and Green Bay. Philly coming off the win at the Giants to win the NFC East. This is a very interesting game. A lot of people like Philly here, but I not sold on their offensive weapons being healthy. That's been their issue all year. Wentz has gotten a lot out of guys like Greg Ward Jr. and even Dallas Goedert and Boston Scott. And I wouldn't really rely on those three guys. I do think that the Eagle defense will step up and get some stops potentially, but I don't think it'll be enough. I think Russell Wilson is the difference in this game. I think that Seattle will win a game that is somewhat competitive, but I could see Jason Myers kicking a late field goal to put them up by double digits to seal the game. So give me Seattle to win this game 26-16, and the over-under is 45, and I like the under in that game as well. So again, my picks. Bills +2.5 and +125 on the money line. Titans +5 and +190 on the money line. Vikings +8 and over 49.5. And Seahawks -1.5 and under 45. But my main picks are the against the spread picks rather than the money lines and the overs and unders. So there you go for my picks for the first round of the NFL playoffs. Now I'm going to do sports predictions for the year of our Lord, in the words of my buddy Nick Costos, 2020. I'd like to have Nick on the podcast as a guest within the next few weeks. Maybe we'll wait till Super Bowl week and we can do the props and stuff, or maybe the AFC NFC Championship week, and then maybe we'll do some futures as well for the other sports and whatnot. And I'll obviously talk about when I'm going to have guests on and whatnot. So, should be interesting in terms of when I'm going to have my guests on again, probably next week. All right, so here we go. 2020 sports predictions. Your Super Bowl champion will be the Kansas City Chiefs. I just think that they're peaking at the right time. I'm sold on their defensive resurgence for the most part. I think Juan Thornhill's been very good for them in the secondary. I think their pass rush led by Frank Clark has stepped up. I think Tyrann Mathieu has been a good pickup for them. And Patrick Mahomes is back and it is rolling. And I think that they'll be your Super Bowl champions, and the narrative about Andy Reid will finally go away and how he can't win a big game. So I'm going to say the Chiefs over the San Francisco 49ers in what should be a great, great, great Super Bowl. Your 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament will be Gonzaga, Duke, Kansas, and let's go with Villanova. I think that those 4 teams will be your 1 seeds. And your Final 4 will be 2 of those teams. I'm going to say Gonzaga and... Let's go with Gonzaga and Villanova. And the 2 more Final 4 teams. Let's go with Michigan State and Louisville. So your Final 4 will be Louisville, Michigan State, Gonzaga, and Villanova. And I believe that was my preseason Final 4 as well, unless if I had Oregon in there. But we'll roll with that 4 right now. National champion, I'm going to stick with my preseason pick of the Michigan State Spartans. I think that Cassius Winston and company will get it done. Despite no Joshua Langford, I'm high on the Spartans. I think they're a team that is somewhat undervalued right now because they had that home loss to Duke and the Joshua Langford situation. So let's go with Michigan State. College football, I think that Clemson will be the preseason number 1 next year. My pick for the national title game will come obviously next week, but I think that they're going to be the preseason number 1 going into next year. Bo Nix will be the popular Heisman pick in the preseason, and people will talk themselves into him being the next Joe Burrow. The NBA, I'm going to say that your 2020 NBA champions will be the Los Angeles Clippers. They'll beat the Lakers in the conference finals. And then I think that the team that comes out of the East, I'm going to go with the Bucks. I think that they'll get revenge. Pressure's on them. I'm whiffing on Philly. They just have been too horrible on the road for me to trust them to win a big playoff game on the road. I think there's a better chance of them losing in the first round than there is of them winning the championship. I think there's teams in the East that we didn't expect to be good that are good, or I should say as good as them, like Miami, Toronto, and even Indiana. The Stanley Cup final, I'm going to go with my preseason pick of the Colorado Avalanche over the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto's turned their season around, courtesy of the firing of Mike Babcock. I think that Colorado is a team that is going to go on a run, and they have that great offense led by the trio of Nathan McKinnon, Gabriel Landeskog, and Mikko Rantanen. And they have a lot of good role players. Their goaltending situation's not bad. So there's your Stanley Cup pick. And then the World Series, I think it's a lock. With the signing of Garrett Cole, the New York Yankees will be your 2020 World Series champions. This is the new Golden State Warriors in sports, the team that everybody's going to be talking about. I think there's a chance that they start the season like 10-0 because they have to play at Baltimore to start the season, and Baltimore sucks, as we know, and that could be a sweep. The rotation's actually good now with those above-average guys that had flashes of being aces, such as Masahiro Tanaka, Luis Severino, and James Paxton are now your 2, 3, and 4 guys. Your 5th starter as of right now is Jay Happ, unless they trade him. And if not Jay Happ, it'll be Jordan Montgomery, who is coming back from Tommy John surgery. Domingo Herman got suspended for the first 63 games of the season due to the domestic violence incident. So he'll be back by mid-season. He'll be treated like a mid-season acquisition. Let's see if he carries over his success from last year. That could be your number 5 starter. He has more upside than Jay Happ as your number 5 starter. So I think the Yankees are in terrific shape. They have a good bullpen, although they did lose Dellin Betances. offense is obviously very good. They have a couple MVP candidates on their team, such as Aaron Judge and Gleyber Torres. Gary Sanchez had an okay year last year. I think he'll be better than he was in the playoffs last year. I think Giancarlo Stanton's poised for a big year. I think this is all adding up to them ending their 11-year championship drought. And Aaron Boone obviously deserves a contract extension and a bonus prediction. I think that Aaron Boone will get a contract extension with the Yankees. Miscellaneous predictions that are not championships. In terms of like free agencies and stuff, I think Anthony Davis will re-sign with the Lakers on a 5-year, $200-something million contract. I think that's a lock. That's as big as a lock as the Yankees winning the World Series next year. Anthony Davis re-signing with the Lakers. The biggest name traded in the NBA this summer. I want to hit a home run here. I want to say Victor Oladipo, but his team has overachieved this year again without him. So I think they'll keep him around a little bit. So I'm going to roll dice and say Karl Anthony Towns is the biggest name traded this year. I think the Golden State Warriors will be the team that lands him. They'll have a front court of Draymond Green and Karl Anthony Towns to go with Curry and Thompson. I think that there's a chance that Draymond goes in that trade. But the logical trade for them would be D'Angelo Russell for Towns with some picks going to Minnesota with Russell. That's what I think happens. So the biggest name trade in the NBA in 2020 will be Karl Anthony Towns. And he'll go to the Golden State Warriors for D'Angelo Russell and picks. NHL, biggest name traded. That's a tough one. There's a couple guys that I think are in play. I think the Rangers' Chris Kreider will be traded at the deadline. The Rangers are a team that's kind of on the bubble right now, and they've underachieved in my mind. So I think that they'll trade Chris Kreider. I don't think it'll be for draft picks, potentially, but it could be. But more realistically, I think that they'll get maybe like a center, a number 2 center, or another defenseman that can help them win, because they are still on the bubble. Like, they're not out of it yet. So I think that they want to get a couple pieces for a rental. And I think that a team like the Blues or the Predators will acquire Kreider from the Rangers. Another prediction for the NHL is that I think the Tampa Bay Lightning will blow it up and rebuild. Yeah, there you go for biggest name, hockey name traded. Get ready for it. Nikita Kucherov. I think that Tampa Bay's window is closing. And I think the biggest name traded will be Kucherov. And I think they'll keep Stamkos around because Stamkos obviously is the face of the franchise and stuff. So I think they can get a lot back for Kucherov. So the biggest name traded in hockey in 2020 will be Nikita Kucherov. Biggest name traded in the NFL, Odell Beckham Jr. I think that he's traded for the second year in a row. And let's take a chance on a team. I'm going to say that he is traded to a team in the NFC, a team that is a up-and-coming kind of like what we thought of the Browns last year. I think the team he goes to is the Washington Redskins. No, they won't trade the number 2 pick for him. I just love the idea of him being back in the NFC East, getting revenge on the Giants. I think that Dwayne Haskins needs another number 1 receiver to go with Terry McLaurin, who's been injured at times throughout the season. And I'm not sold that McLaurin's a number 1. So I could see them trading their second-round pick plus a couple other assets. Maybe Harmon, the rookie receiver from NC State. Maybe they send in one of their pass rushers there, like a Jonathan Allen or something like that. So Odell Beckham Jr. to the Washington Redskins. In terms of a Kucherov team, I think the New York Islanders trade for Nikita Kucherov. I think that they need a piece on offense to make themselves a Stanley Cup contender. I don't know if they'll do this in the summer or at the deadline this year. So Nikita Kucherov to the New York Islanders, and then Odell Beckham Jr. to the Redskins, and then Karl Anthony Towns to the Golden State Warriors. And lastly, in terms of trade predictions, I have a couple for baseball in terms of biggest names traded, because there's a couple of them. And I think one of them will end up with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and I think that's going to be Francisco Lindor of the Cleveland Indians. I don't know if that'll happen before the season or at the deadline. And I think before the season, the Atlanta Braves will trade for Mookie Betts. So I'm carrying over two predictions I made for the offseason in baseball into next season. But I think that Lindor will happen at the deadline and Mookie will happen before the season. I think that there's a chance the Dodgers land both Betts and Lindor. But I still don't think that puts them ahead of the Yankees in the chase for World Series, because obviously the Dodgers lost Heijun Ryu, and they still have to replace him in that rotation somehow. And as good as Ryu was last year, and I don't think he's that good, but I do think that they need help in their rotation as well. So the two biggest names in baseball traded in 2020, Mookie Betts and Francisco Lindor, would not rule out Chris Bryant whatsoever. All right, my first best bet of 2020, that will be presented to you by DraftKings. We're going to do an NBA parlay with a couple money lines. We will take the Celtics at home against the Hawks. We'll take the Rockets at home against the Sixers. We'll take the Lakers at home against the Pelicans. And we'll switch over to college basketball. And we'll take Houston against UCF. We'll take Ohio State against Wisconsin. And we're going to take a leap of faith with Milwaukee against IUPUI. So that's 6 teams, about 3-1 odds. 50-cent wager payout is exactly $2. I'll be back on Monday recapping the playoff games, the NBA, the NHL, and college football and college basketball. We're going to be doing a NFL mock draft some point next week. We're going to have a couple guests on next week. We'll see. And I hope you guys have a fabulous weekend, everybody. It's glad to be back.